Thanks for subscribing to and downloading Plant Talk with your host, Fred Howard. Plant Talk is sponsored by Franklin Park Conservatory and Botanical Gardens in Columbus, Ohio, featuring exotic plant collections and displays, seasonal art and nature-based exhibitions, outdoor gardens, and a variety of educational programming. fpconservatory.org. Now, here's your host, Fred Howard.
Good morning, Ohio gardeners, and what a beautiful morning it is. And, of course, this being the day at the big horseshoe, well, what used to be a horseshoe, in my opinion, is off to a wonderful start. There was a beautiful orange glow in the sky right at dawn in a 15-minute travel southerly in Columbus. It was amazing to me, and it always is, how much there can be change in color in the sky, position of the sun, or let's just say the twist of the earth as it goes, and so on. And then I look up and find some geese, and I'm enthralled with counting the geese, and I find out that at the traveling speeds I was coming up on the guy in front of me a little faster than the geese were flying over.
Yeah.
So anyhow, there's how it goes. It is a beautiful time. We're into a bit of an unusual situation. I think I heard the man say last night in my let's just say 11 o'clock din, I think he said we could hit 78 today, and there is a possibility of even a touch more. Well, okay, that's today. Now, what does this set us up for? We'll discuss that, even though it won't make a bit of difference.
We know exactly what this is going to set us up for, and
right.
it's white.
It's white. That's
yeah,
right.
But hopefully that'll be down the road.
That's
Sitting alongside Fred Howard this morning in our Plant Talk studios, I am Mark Noose. And if you have a question or comment this morning, we'd love for you to call the program, 1-866-PLANT-TALK with two T's, or 1-866-752-6882. And like we do every week, Fred takes a look around his yard and sees what's still in color and gives us a count. What do you think?
Well, Mark, it's actually quite significant. Now, it's not the brightness of mid-May and early June with annuals coming on. It is not the preceding 30 to 45 days of perennials coming up out of the ground and flowering for us. But right now, I went out. I didn't even count because I took kind of a mixed view.
Well, I counted.
Did you?
I took your list, and it's 26.
Okay. Well, I'm not surprised.
Wow, that's pretty good for this time of year.
It is. And even to the extent now I have to appreciate the violets. I won't go into the whole story, but I'm kind of overrun with violets. I didn't get out with the weed killer this year, and therefore they're flowering again. I'm not going to be able to pick the bouquets like I did as a child to take home to Mommy, but at the same time they're there. Mums are in their glory right now. Asters are holding on, but they're kind of at the end. Then where I don't normally mention in my list the annual types of things, in this case I was out in the sun, which was glorious, and I was enjoying the black and blue salvia. Now, black and blue salvia was planted in 3 different spots in my yard to attract hummingbirds, and it did. There's just no question about it. It was only 3 years ago that I found out what a fantastic, let's just say, trap that was for those little creatures. But right now, with the sun on it, it's about as clear a blue as you can expect on the ground. Now, it's rivaled by some other blues, but the plant stands right now 2.5 feet, maybe a little more in height in the one better watered spot. It is kind of splayed out over a 2.5, 3 foot wide area with standing stalks, if you will, stems and so on, just fantastically full of blue flowers.
And once again, our toll-free number, if you'd like to contact us this morning, if you have a question or comment for Fred, is 1-866-PLANT-TALK with two T's. That's 1-866-752-6882. We're also going to take your email questions that were sent in this week. And, of course, Fred's Plant of the Week is coming up next, so stick with us. We're glad you joined us this morning for Plant Talk.
This summer at Franklin Park Conservatory and Botanical Gardens, the gardens are in full color. Welcome its tropical and native butterflies in flight in the indoor Pacific Island Water Garden. View the conservatory's bonsai collection and experience the exhibition Origami in the Garden. Find details at fpconservatory.org.
And welcome back to the program. Mark Noose here alongside Fred Howard, the Ohio nurseryman. And Fred, your plants of the week.
Well, I had to go plants, Mark, because one that I have mentioned several times, including last year and probably the year before, that is so beautiful right now. It's beautyberry by name. It is a plant that we treat like a perennial in a way. It is one that comes out into growth in the spring. Then during the course of the early summer, it starts to really shape up and grow fast, kind of from a crown. And right now, the one I'm particularly concerned with in looking at is about 3.5 feet wide and maybe nearing 2.5 feet tall. The stems come up in what I call splay out from a crown. It's unrestricted in terms of the space that it's in. And yesterday afternoon, again, with some sun, I was looking at it when it just absolutely glistened. Exciting, period. That's all there is to it. Now, is it going to be big enough to stop the children crossing your lot? No, or certainly not kids that are heading off to school. It's just strictly a visual thing. It is not particularly exciting until, well, knowing what's going to happen, I start watching it in August to see about the flower bud set and then the fruit set. And right now, it's in its glory, and it will stay that way until a couple of hard freezes really scrunch down on it. Doesn't kill the plant, but at the same time, it would be okay if it did kill the top, because remember, it's a lot like a butterfly bush. We should trim it down pretty hard in the spring. The one that I'm speaking of right now was cut off at about 4.5 or 5 inches above the ground, somewhat brutally, no finesse whatsoever. I removed a few of the older stems, but then literally, in my own terminology, whacked it off. Normally I trim with finesse, but some things not so. And then we come to what I call the bonfires. I simply enjoy the fall colors of sugar maple. Sugar maples vary. They are all one genetic base, but then there are cultivars of it and so on. And they color at different times. And then in individual trees, there's some yellow, orange, some reddish, sometimes toward a burgundy in a few of the leaves, to where if you're off with, let's just say, driving down the road and the sun's behind you or over your head, and you look at a sugar maple in good shape this time of year, it looks like a 40-foot high bonfire. It just really is something. So I have to throw those in as a matter of enjoying the products of their labors in the spring in terms of syrup, which I still have some left for this winter. And then the fall colors come on, and it makes it a fantastic tree. It's also a plant that I kind of plant with caution. When I go into a neighborhood, so to speak, especially one with any kind of age to it, neighborhood-wise, I will look for sugar maples before I recommend a sugar maple. They're a little particular about site. They can't run too wet. They're not like a silver maple growing right down edge of the stream. They can't stand on the highest peak and run dry in the summertime. So let's just say we got to go into a moderate situation where between Mother Nature raining up until, well, call it mid to late June, and then you taking over every 3 weeks with a darn good sprinkling where you can put on an inch or more of water, you can get along with a sugar maple and then reap these rewards. Then the next, which was supposed to, and by record shows up on my birthday, October 10th, is finally in full bloom right now. And I've probably mentioned this in years past, but when I wait until, let's just say, 3 in the afternoon, where the sun's above and behind me, and I look at the witch hazel, it is in flower, little strappy flowers, not too outstanding until you get closer, but the yellowing leaves, then backed up by what's left of a blue spruce. The spruce is ailing from this more or less common fungal disease right now, but what an exciting situation. It's a picture of its own, and you only get to have it for about a week and a half in the fall. So those are the 3 plants of the week at this point in time.
So let's go back to the sugar maples.
Okay.
If they're a little particular, where exactly would you like to put a sugar maple in your lawn?
Mark, I have used them in a great number of areas, but at the same time, I would not go to the peak of a mound or a hillside. I wouldn't plant on top of a heavy load harsh soil that will stand too wet in the spring, because that would be at least a negative for the root system. And then when it dries up in the summertime, without rain and without us helping it, they can get too dry and injure the roots more, and they just simply don't grow well. So I would tell you that we want to be above the stream bed by, I'm going to say 6 or 8 feet in elevation, so that we're not running with wet soil in the spring for too long. And then we don't want to go to the high, dry peak. So I guess if we were coming in the top of a magic little mound, or bigger than that, but still a mound, I would be inclined not to plant on the peak. That would be probably no reason to do that in the first place. I would go toward what I'll call the morning sun, or stay on the east side of the top of the hill rather than west side, so that even though afternoon sun can get hot and nasty, the roots of the tree theoretically would be in a cooler soil for the afternoon run. And I think if you kind of judge that, you'll be okay. So not the wet spots in your property, not the highest point if you have a lot of rise, and kind of in between. And then it's a plant that'll handle some really good soil. Doesn't like some of our clay junk, to put it that way.
What does, for that matter?
Well, that's true. That's a good point.
You can always listen to our past shows. You can go to our website, planttalkradio.com, and listen to our podcasts of all of our past shows that we have on there. And you can also subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and get those delivered each week. And, of course, Fred will be back coming up next on Plant Talk with your questions and some email questions that we got this week. Stick with us.
This summer at Franklin Park Conservatory and Botanical Gardens, the gardens are in full color. Welcome its tropical and native butterflies in flight in the indoor Pacific Island Water Garden. View the conservatory's bonsai collection and experience the exhibition Origami in the Garden. Find details at fpconservatory.org.
And welcome back to the program. Mark News here alongside Fred Howard, the Ohio nurseryman. And Fred, we did get some emails this week. Folks can always email the program during the week, and we'll answer your questions on Saturday mornings. And the email address is fred@planttalkradio.com, or just go to our website, planttalkradio.com, and click on the Ask Fred button and type in your question. Bob sent us this. Bob lives in Paulding, and he says, I just finished trimming my wife's Rose of Sharon bushes. He said, I probably should have called you first. but she was gone, and I only had so much time to get it done. But he says, seriously, is there a correct way to trim Rose of Sharon? They were about 6 to 8 feet tall. Now they're about 4 to 5 feet tall, and I hope I didn't make an error in judgment.
No, Bob, you didn't. As a matter of fact, you hit a good timing point, because they have, of course, most of them have finished blooming at this point. They will not set flower buds until next year into the growth season. They're one of those that puts out the stem first and then sets the flower bud. So you hit that perfect time where you should not have deterred the flowering much. Now, because you cut off roughly 4 feet, you're going to take away a lot of the flowering tissue. However, I would expect the plants were in good shape before you trimmed them. You wouldn't have had to trim them that hard, I should say. And at that point, then, they should put on a lot of growth, and I would expect them to put out a good number of flowers. Flower buds first, of course. I would recommend, in terms of Rose of Sharon, that you do not fertilize them. Every once in a while, I do recommend fertilization after a hard pruning. These guys can grow pretty rampant on their own from, let's just say, survival techniques over the eons. Now, 4-foot reduction or thereabouts is a little harsh, but I doubt that it will bother a Rose of Sharon much at all. The only thing you may not have done that would be an improvement is Rose of Sharon, like all plants, gets what I'll call old stems in it and then younger stems. You might still be able to go out, if your wife leaves again and you have time, you might go out and cut a few of the old stems out so that they're not getting too compacted down in, we'll call it the crown area right near ground, or just on up a couple, 3 feet. So you maybe could have thinned a little bit more than just to do outside pruning or outside of the plant pruning. Now, if you don't have much time, you can pretty much just go after them, as I would expect you maybe did. However, if you do have time, Rose of Sharon, even with all of its resilience, can appreciate being trimmed to an outside bud so that it opens out away from the center, just for sunshine, movement of air, all the good things that can happen. So you would slow down and literally watch where you're making the cut, still